Hey students, so for step 3 of this document, you are being asked to analyze this poem by Langston Hughes, and this is a video guide to help you through that analysis. So in The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald uses his color symbolism to criticize how the lavish and immoral lifestyle of the Roaring Twenties destroyed the American dream. To help us begin our own thought process on the significance of this theme, we will complete a quick and, if you so choose, guided analysis, and if you're watching this video, you have chosen, a guided analysis of Langston Hughes' very famous 1951 poem, Harlem. Despite being written over 2 decades after our novel, the poem offers similar insights on the American dream. So essentially, the primary theme of this poem about the American dream matches that of Fitzgerald. And so we can gain insight into Fitzgerald's message about the American dream before we even start reading the book by kind of considering this poem. So it'll set our brains up for it. So let's first read the poem, Harlem, by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? So what does deferred mean? Therefore, what is a dream deferred? Consider why Hughes uses this specific word. So even if you vaguely know what a word means, it's always a good idea to look it up, just because there might be like slight specific aspects of it that you hadn't thought of. So if we look at deferred, it says to put off an action or event to a later time, to postpone. And so they deferred the decision until February. So put off an action to a later time, postponed. So when we say a dream deferred, it means that it's a dream that's been put off until later. So it's not a dream that's been forgotten. It's not a dream that's denied. It's a dream where there's still hope that at some point in the future it can be attained, but it's been put off until that time. And so deferred is a pretty complex word. And also I really like the alliteration of it, the dream deferred. It emphasizes both of those D sounds. So consider why Hughes uses this specific word, because he could have said a dream destroyed, or a dream forgotten. Why do you think that he specifically uses the word deferred? So I've kind of explained the meaning of it, but what I want you to think about what the significance of it is. Like, why does he do that? So next, in stanzas 2 and 3, Hughes accumulates a series of very highly descriptive metaphors to question the effects of a deferred dream. In your own words, what would each of the 5 metaphors mean in literal terms? What experience is he trying to evoke through each metaphor? So there's a ton of imagery in here, and they're also metaphors. And so each metaphor is building this idea of the effect a deferred dream can have on someone who is deferring that dream. So the first thing it says is, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? So what metaphor is being used here? What would a dream feel like if it was dried up in the sun? So the idea is, if you've deferred a dream, the dream is just sitting around like food on a counter that you've left out for a couple days, or in this case, a raisin in the sun. And so it's the idea that the metaphor creates this image of this dream's been deferred, so it's sitting out waiting, and the sun shrivels it up. And so what that's describing is the idea of the dream shrinking and essentially all the hope being sucked out of it until it's just an empty husk of what the dream used to be. And so the first effect that a dream deferred can experience is the dream essentially being made hopeless. Like, you lose hope in the dream, and it loses its excitement, and you lose your desire for it. It shrivels up. And so that's the explanation for it. Let's consider like the next one. So it says, or fester like a sore and then run. So now we have a second metaphor that's a different idea of what could happen to a dream deferred. So for this one, it's describing like if you've had a sore and you know it, or a scab, and you scratch it off and like it's kind of gross, like pussing. Yeah. So the idea of like a pussing sore and running. So the idea here is that what can a dream deferred do? What is this metaphor describing? So it's the idea of it causes you constant discomfort. So it's the idea that not being able to achieve your dream could cause you anxiety. It can cause you pain. It's this itch that never goes away and never heals because you can never actually achieve that dream. There's the possibility, it's always there, but you can't achieve it. And so that's the second metaphor. So for the third one, does it stink like rotten meat? I'd like for you to do this one on your own. So consider that metaphor. What is it trying to describe could happen to a dream deferred? Are crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? And now this sounds like it could be positive. It's not. Read it in a negative way. What is this maybe describing about a dream deferred? And then it says, maybe it just sags like a heavy load. And I'll do this one. So with the metaphor, it's like a heavy bag, your heavy book bag on your back. And so a dream deferred is something that we might have to carry around with us, and it weighs us down because we wanted this thing and we can't have it. And so it makes it harder to do our day-to-day lives. And so those two stanzas in the poem are super cool. Langston Hughes does a great job of using these metaphors to describe what it feels like when you have this dream and you have to keep putting it off. It's really, really well written. And so in the final stanza, number 4, this one line here, Hughes offers one final option of what could happen to the dream deferred. What does this metaphor mean in literal terms? Why does he save this one until the very end of his poem? And with what message does this leave the reader? So after all of these metaphors he builds, he ends with this one metaphor, and it's in italics for emphasis, and it says, or does it explode? And so with this one, it's the idea that the dream deferred, if it explodes, it's the idea of being fed up. The idea that I've put off my dream for so long and I'm not going to do it anymore. And so the deferred dream explodes and the person refuses to accept being repressed or told no or told to wait, and they rebel against it. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they achieve their dream. Doesn't mean that the dream is achieved. It doesn't mean that it's reached. But it's the idea that the person is not going to be dried up. They're not going to sit there and suffer. They're not going to feel the weight of it. They're going to rise up and fight against whatever's stopping them from at least trying to pursue this dream. They're done putting it off. They're going to actively pursue it. And so the ending has this really good kind of intense like rally cry to it, which is a really great way to end the poem. And so that's why he saves it to the very end, because we have kind of all of these like negative experiences that would come from a dream deferred. And then it ends with not necessarily a win, because again, it's not a win, but it's definitely a huge change in tone. And this idea that even if you aren't going to achieve it, it doesn't mean you can't fight to achieve it. And so that's the message, the idea that you don't just have to accept a dream deferred. You can rise up against whatever's stopping you from going out to get it, and you can go out and try to get it. And so it says, Langston Hughes was a Black male author writing during the Harlem Renaissance, a 1950s Black artist movement located in Harlem that celebrated Black culture, life and culture. And there's actually a unit on the Harlem Renaissance that some of you guys might have done or might be about to do. How might this poem apply to Hughes's own experience during this time? How might it apply to his American dream? And so I'm going to let you answer this one on your own. But with me having helped you analyze the meaning of the poem, try to apply it to Langston Hughes's actual context, like his life, and consider what the poem might have meant to him when he wrote it. And then you have your final reflection down here. Let's bring together our poem and the book cover above and consider what the opening of the movie foreshadows. So it's asking you to bring all these steps together and consider what the poem says about the American dream. With these ideas in your mind, answer the question, what do you believe Fitzgerald will have to say about the American dream? So this is essentially the reflection question you're answering. And so remember that Langston Hughes's poem has a very similar message, a very similar theme as the novel. So with the poem in mind and all the other thoughts we've had about the book in this document, what do you believe Fitzgerald will have to say about the American dream, specifically the American dream for the 1920s? All right. I hope you enjoyed the poem. It's one of my favorites. Yeah. And thanks so much for going through the questions with me. I'll see y'all later in our next video. Bye.